candidates for mayor of the city of Orlando. If you're here for that other debate, you need to get in your car and go 1,000 miles north, and you'll be in the right place. Or you can just go home and watch it starting at 8, and we should have you out of here close to in time for that. So my name is Mike Lafferty. I'm the opinion editor for the Orlando Sentinel. We used to call that the editorial page editor. And before we get any further, would you all please stand so we can say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I want to thank a couple of people. I promise not to drone on too long with the thanks like it's the Oscars or something. But I want to thank the League of Women Voters. Their co-president, Gloria Picar, is here. And I also want to recognize, because it's always a good idea to recognize your boss, Julie Anderson. She's the editor of the Orlando Sentinel. She's right there. And the other organizations that helped with this, WUCF is our video partner for this event, the Central Florida Urban League, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Metro Orlando, and thanks to the Orlando Science Center for this great venue. And I also would like to thank your cell phones. I'd like to thank them for coming out of your pocket or out of your purse and being turned to silent. Thank you, cell phones. Let me go ahead and introduce the candidates. We have 3, Mayor Buddy Dyer, Commissioner Sam Ings, and Aretha Simons. Thank you all very much for coming out tonight and participating in this very American type of event. The format is this. First of all, I wanted to point out, if you haven't been given a card from a league page, raise your hand and they'll bring you a card and you can write questions on them. The questions will be screened, and at a later point in the debate, they'll be brought up to me, and I'll ask some of your questions, so you can play a role in this as well. And because Donna Brazil was not involved in this event, nobody has seen any of the questions that I have in advance. So let's give the candidates a round of applause. And that's so you could get it out of your system, because we'd like you to hold your applause or your catcalls. Definitely hold the catcalls. But we'll give them a big round of applause at the end. Okay. Let me tell you about the order of the debate. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to give an opening statement of some type. We have a timekeeper. Where's our timekeeper? Right here. And I've moderated league debates before, and they don't mess around. They will give you a 1-minute warning, and then they'll give you a 30-second warning, and then, I don't know, a foghorn goes up or something, but they will ask you to cease speaking. We'll have start with several questions from me. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer those questions. And I will do my best to rotate the order of the questions, so not the same person isn't going first or last or in the middle. And then we'll have the questions from the audience. And then we'll have closing statements, which also will be 2 minutes. And again, time will be enforced. So we're going to start with the opening statements, unless I've forgotten something. I guess I haven't. And we drew the names randomly, and we'll start with Commissioner Ings. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Samuel B. Ings, and it is my sincere request that I receive your vote for Orlando's next mayor. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and to all our smart constituents of Orlando for being active participants in our city's election. I've spent years preparing myself for this role, for which I am highly capable and qualified to create a better Orlando for everyone. I'm a graduate of Valencia College, Rollins College, and Orlando College. I have 3 master's degrees, an honorary doctorate degree, and I am a graduate of the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia. But as you know, degrees just show that you have advanced your studies. Ultimately, it is what you do for the people that really matters. I am proud to say that as a 30-year veteran of the Orlando Police Department, retiring as a commander and serving as Mayor Pro Tem and Commissioner of District 6 and the Tourist District, and that my entire life has been dedicated to protecting, serving, and improving the lives of our community. Serving the public is my anointing. Becoming your next mayor of Orlando is my priority. It is not a plan B because I was not selected for a job that I have repeatedly told the public that I wanted and would vacate the office of mayor once I am granted the opportunity. I am so eager to usher in a new era of honest, open, and transparent leadership for the city of Orlando, and would like to briefly highlight my vision for a platform for a better Orlando for everyone. I've always been very passionate, and it is my promise that once I am elected that I will focus on 5 key areas for a better Orlando for everyone: crime prevention and public safety, affordable housing, higher wage jobs, economic development, improved roads and infrastructure, and an inclusive Orlando for everyone.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ings. Ms. Simons, you're next.
Good evening, and thank you to the League for inviting us to this evening, and thank you all for being here. I'm Aretha Simons. I was born and raised in Florida, Arcadia, Florida. A lot of people have never heard of that small town. I moved to Orlando in 1988 after 2 years of college. I went to boot camp here, the United States Naval boot camp here, and I retired from the United States Navy after 20 years of service. My first 10 years in the Navy, I served in Operation Desert Storm. After that, I got out, joined the reserve, and moved back here to Orlando in 1999. In 2001, after the 9/11 attacks, I received the presidential recall saying that I had been recalled back to active duty to serve in the United States Navy. I thought my job was going to be in IT, thought I was going to be an air conditioner, and they said, nope, you're going to be a military police. So here's your 9mm and here's your M16. I did 12 hours of duty, 12 hours of watch, 6 days a week, wearing a 50-pound backpack on my back. And a lot of times, I didn't know if we were gonna make it home. But one thing I am proud to say, that we saved a lot of lives. So that's 3 things I want you to know about me: that I'm a fighter, I help build people up, and I save lives. Once I got off active duty and I started my time here as the food service director at a women's residential facility, I started a nonprofit called Able Community Kitchen School, and from that nonprofit, we helped women, welfare to work recipients, formerly incarcerated men and women, learn a job skill. From that job skill, we went out and fed the homeless with it. After doing that, I started writing grants because people said, well, how are you getting the funding? So I started helping people set up their own nonprofits and writing grants for them. So I've helped millions of dollars come into the city. And the people that we've helped with social and economic needs start their nonprofit and bring in money to make difference in this community, I think we can do a lot more. We can do a lot better here in Orlando. We call Orlando a world-class city. We are world-class, but we now need to think about it from the inside out and not from the outside in. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Buddy Dyer, your turn.
Thank you. I want to thank the League and the Sentinel and the Science Center and all the partners for hosting us this evening, and I want to say good evening to all of you. You know, when I go to U.S. Conference of Mayors and interact with other mayors, I always tell them, I'm the happiest mayor in America. And they're like, how can you be the happiest mayor in America? And I tell them about the culture of collaboration and partnership that we've created that has led to the great success that we've had in our community. I tell them about our community rallying together to convince the governor and the legislature to grant a medical school to the University of Central Florida and the domino effect that had in creating the medical city at Lake Nona. I tell them about the USTA facility out at Lake Nona and how it's the largest tennis facility in the world. I tell them about how our community came together with the tourist community to create 3 brand new community venues, the Dr. Phillips Center, the Amway Center, and the Camping World Stadium. I tell them about bringing MLS to our community. I tell them about the sustained effort that we had to bring Sunrail to our community. I tell them about the Paramore Kids Zone and the great success that that has had for the children that live in Paramore. I tell them about Creative Village and the UCF downtown campus in Valencia and bringing EA downtown. And most importantly, I tell them about the resiliency of our community after the Pulse tragedy. I'm so proud of this community, and that's why I want to serve another 4 years as your mayor.
Okay, thank you. Hold your applause, please. Okay, I have a few questions for y'all. We'll start down at the end with Rita Simons. In March, the Orlando Sentinel reported on a national study that found the Orlando metro area is the nation's worst when it comes to affordable housing for the region's poorest people. What has the city done right? What has it done wrong? And what else does it need to do to help the most vulnerable residents keep a roof over their heads?
That's very important, and that's why I say we call ourselves world-class, and we are, but we can't be world-class and dead last at the same time. So what the city has done right, they have made some efforts to help get housing for the homeless, but I don't think it's enough. I think we need to do more, and when I say more, we can create our own fund to have housing. We depending on government funding and the Sadowski funds, where we can create our own funds. Many other states have done it. We can do that with developer funding, we can do that with grant funding, and we can do that with private, and public partnership. Now, I think that as far as moving forward, we're going to have a housing crisis for a long time, but the current administration knew about that. We knew about the housing bubble in 2008, so we must have known about what the housing crisis is going to look like if we say that 1,000 people move here every week. We have to plan now, and we have to move fast with this, with, again, creating public funding through private, public, grant writing, and getting the developers to pay into this fund.
Okay, thank you. A reminder, 1-minute answers. Okay. Sam Ings, you're next to talk about affordable housing.
Thank you. And, you know, this is an issue that's so very dear to me because I've been a part of the Orlando City Council for 13 years. And during that time, I've seen that there were so many areas within our city that we needed development, specifically to help with the affordable housing crisis. And it is a crisis, and for the past 2 decades, it's been a real problem for the city of Orlando. What has the city done right? Well, the city has improved in providing some affordable housing units within the city of Orlando. What has the city done wrong? We've waited too long to really attack this particular problem of affordable housing within the city of Orlando, and we have to do much better.
Okay, Buddy Dyer.
So affordable housing is an extremely difficult issue, and what the city has done right is, although it's a regional issue, we've led by example. The city has changed a lot of its building code rules so that you can have smaller units, smaller apartment complexes, granny flats, and then we've led with our money as well. We've invested close to $38 million in 14 different affordable projects that's created over 1,500 new units in the affordable housing area. We've created a land trust in Paramore that bought 82 single-family homes, and we have put money in to renovate those and make them more energy efficient. And then the county is, Mayor Demings has put together a task force, and they are adopting as their recommendations for the county a lot of the actions that the city has already taken.
Okay, in a related question, and Sam Ings, we'll start with you on this one. Orlando, or the region of the 50 largest metro areas in America, Orlando is dead last when it comes to median wages. I wonder if you think that's a problem, and we recognize this is it's for the region, it's not the city of Orlando, but do you think it's a problem, and what role can the city play to remedy that?
Well, it is a problem specifically for the region and Orlando. And what can the city of Orlando do to remedy that? We've started right now with working towards paying our workers within the city $15 an hour. But, you know, that's incrementally over 3 years. And we need to do much better than that. We need to start now. And we need to make sure that we look at our budget and be able to make the adjustments, because we don't want people living in poverty. And when we are talking about people living in poverty, no, they can't afford any housing. They can't afford to hardly pay for any other bills that they have. And at the same time, we have to make sure that this wage increase really happens for our people, not only from the minimum wage, but also living wage. Living wages are so important to us too, and we know that people are working hard. There are new police officers, new teachers that need some good wages. Thank you.
Okay, Buddy Dyer.
So we need to attack that in a number of different ways, and yes, I do think it's a major issue for our community. As Commissioner Ings has said, our new contracts with SEIU and LIU, which are our two unions, contain provisions that will take every employee, full-time or part-time in the city of Orlando, to $15 an hour over the course of the next 3 years. And our responsible contractor policy will say that anybody that receives work through a contract with the city of Orlando will have to match those wages. We also need to continue to attract high-wage jobs, but they don't have to all be doctors and lawyers and researchers. Valencia, as part of the Creative Village, is doing something called the accelerated training facility that will have more mid-level type of jobs, but it will give skills to people to make not $15 an hour, but $20 an hour and $25 an hour. So we need to approach it on 3 different levels.
Okay, thank you. Aretha Simons.
Well, I think that when we invite other companies to come to our city, we need to let them know we need our residents to make more than $50 an hour. Can you make that promise to us? Because we have a lot of businesses that will want to move here and will continue to move here as we grow Orlando. Orlando city workers being paid $15 an hour, that should have happened a long time ago. We shouldn't have waited to an election time to make that happen. But moving forward, I think making sure that also the boards that the mayor sits on, that the mayor has influence over the other organizations, like the tourism industry, making sure that that's one of the lowest paid wages, the people who work in the tourism industry, to make sure that they're meeting the needs of the people as well.
Okay, this question will start with Buddy Dyer. You mentioned the Creative Village west of downtown. Along with that, the Magic are planning an expansion, and government buildings have gone up over there, and this has created a new economic opportunity and prosperity, but that prosperity also means higher rents that can force people out of their homes or the businesses. It also means watering down, in some cases, in some cities, it's meant watering down the area's cultural roots. So what should the city be doing to ensure that longtime residents and businesses in Paramore don't get forced out and that the area retains its cultural identity?
So we're certainly extremely cautionary about maintaining the culture and the heritage of the neighborhood. Creative Village provides opportunity for the youth of Paramore, for those that are looking to increase their job skills. Kids at the Paramore Kids Zone will be able to actually be on a campus and have the ACE school there. On the housing aspect of it, the first housing development that went in at Creative Village is Amelia Court. 40% of those units are affordable. We have several other projects that are going to be mostly affordable in Paramore as well. And then I mentioned the 82 single-family houses. We probably have about 20% of the people in Paramore, or less than 20%, own their home. So it's important that we maintain the housing stock, but it has to be quality. So that's why we went in and are doing the 82 houses.
Okay, Rita Simons.
Can you repeat the last part of that question for me?
Yeah, I just wondered what the city should be doing to ensure that people who live in Paramore, businesses that are in Paramore, can stay there as the area, as rents go up and it becomes more prosperous? And how do you keep the cultural identity of the area as well?
Well, I think that's already a done deal. People have moved out of Paramore. There used to be thousands of people that lived in Paramore. Now there are very few. The city, as he said, has bought 82 houses, 82 homes to remodel. Of course, the rents is going to be high as people move down there. So I think one of the things that the city could do moving forward is be transparent and let the people know what's going on so they can decide, they can vote on these ideas rather than going to say, hey, we're going to build Creative Village and, you know, we're going to build new homes, because you're pricing everybody out of their neighborhood. And as far as the Creative Village, that's already done. So whoever becomes mayor, there's nothing you can change about that. So people who live in Paramore now won't be the same people who will have those advantages if they lived in Paramore, you know, 10, 15 years ago.
Okay, Sam Ings.
Thank you. And I would say this, that gentrification has already set in. And there were 20,000 people that lived in Paramore. Now it's down to about 6,000 or 4,000. And of course, you know, Creative Village is a good thing as far as UCF Valencia and all of our interactive companies that are there, the housing for the students that will come in there. But the people in the surrounding area is where we have a problem. And from that perspective, no housing, low jobs, and no opportunities for any growth or anything like that. And when we look at even the southern part of Paramore in the Holden Heights area, we've never had any real development in that particular area where we have infill housing that we can build affordable housing and affordable multi-unit there for families and for our children.
Okay, thank you. We'll go back down to Rita Simons and start with you on this question. Candidates for office often say they're running to get something changed. Can you cite an example of a change that you would propose to improve Orlando city government? And importantly, how would you measure that?
Well, one of the things I would definitely want to change is to make sure there's more transparency. Everybody always say there's always transparency, but there's not. I think we need to have the meetings at night where working people can come to the city council meetings, and when we make a decision, that we make sure that we're doing it in the best interest of the citizens, not for the short term, but for the long term. For example, was it smart to put the soccer stadium where it is? Did the residents agree to it, and will it benefit the residents in the long run? So that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to changing.
Okay, Sam Ings.
Yeah, one of the changes that I would bring is an open form of government, a government that's honest, open, and transparent. And I think it's very important that people realize that they will have a seat at the table at my administration. The office of mayor would be open to you. You would have an opportunity to sit and talk with me, ask me any questions, even bring any ideas. One of the other things that I would see is reaching out and dealing with our homeless situation, specifically in downtown Orlando and throughout our city. I think it's important that we really help those individuals really reinvent themselves, deal with mental health issues that they may be facing, so that they can become new products of society. And how will it be measured? By the people.
Okay, Buddy Dyer.
That's a little harder question for
I know
me.
it is, yeah. It's a challenge for you.
So I would say the changes that are most important are twofold. And one of the things that our administration has tried to do is make sure that our city workforce and city boards are reflective of our very diverse population. And that's sometimes challenging, but I think that we've been up to that task. If you look across my administration, there are a lot of people of color and a lot of females that are in some of the highest level jobs throughout the organization. The other thing is we've made a lot of changes in policies to protect all of our citizens. So whether it's the Trust Act that helps to protect those who are undocumented from being scared to contact the police for fear of being picked up by ICE, or whether it's protections for our LGBTQ community. We're a community that embraces diversity and has to be reflected through our city government.
Okay. I saw a couple of people come in after we got started, so I wanted to remind everybody that if you have a question that you want to ask, raise your hand. One of the League of Women Voters pages will come and give you a card. You can write it on there and then raise your hand again. They'll pick it up. And we'll get to those in a few minutes. I wanted to ask, and let's see, what was the order here? Sam Ings, I believe you're next. Orlando has a citizen review board that's empowered to review citizen complaints that involve officers using force, involves police procedures and policies about force. Orlando's board is strictly advisory to the police chief. I wonder if you think that whether Orlando's Citizen Advisory Board, Police Advisory Board, has been effective, and do you think that it ought to have some additional powers that some municipalities in other areas have granted to these review boards?
Yes, I think it's time that we really seriously look at that for our police review board, because even as I read a lot of the minutes, it's just advisory from that perspective. But I can sense the feel and the tenor of those board members. They want certain actions done. And specifically as it relates with our police officers and how they're treating people in our community. And so I think it's important that they have a little bit more teeth in what they do. And I know it's an issue dealing with our police union, but at the same time, we have to come to the table to decide these things because it's what's good for the people, the residents and the citizens of the city of Orlando.
Okay, Buddy Dyer.
So we have a system of discipline, and largely it's made at the bargaining table with the police union, with obviously input of the police chief. I'm comfortable with the way the committee works today as an advisory board. They advise on most of the policies that are adopted by the police department. They don't have the ability to issue discipline. That is left with our deputy chiefs and our police chief, and I think that's the way it ought to be.
Okay, Aretha Simons.
I think we should definitely take our Citizen Review Board very serious, because I've seen on social media where people say they've seen the review board and they've been influenced by, when it comes to discipline, they've been influenced by the police officers or somebody above them. So when they make their reviews or their suggestions, I think it should be taken seriously, and we should adopt what other cities are doing, because a lot of times when the review board turn in their minutes, is pushed to the side, and then you have the good old boy system that says we're not going to do anything to discipline this officer. And I think it's very important that we take our review board seriously, and we definitely should make sure that they sit on the review board at a minimum of 3 years. A lot of times it's hard to understand what you can do and what you can say once you've been on a review board just for a short amount of time.
Okay. Speaking of boards, the Orlando mayor typically sits on the board of the Orlando Airport and the Expressway Authority. And through the years, there's been a lot of scrutiny, even a grand jury probe into campaign donations from contractors at those agencies. I'm wondering if you think there should be any restrictions on board members, including the mayor, collecting or soliciting donations from contractors with those entities. And Buddy Dyer, we'll start with you.
Well, the problem with that issue, it sounds good when you say it, but the mayor of Orlando serves on no less than 10 boards. So GOA, the Expressway Authority, Metro Plan, Links, Sunrail, Tourist Development Council, OUC. So if you started prohibiting raising money from anybody that does businesses with any of the boards that the mayor sits on, there wouldn't be too many people left to raise money from. I like to have the same rules apply to all of the agencies if possible, because if you have a whole bunch of different rules for this agency and that agency, that's when you can get caught up making a mistake.
Okay, Aretha Simons.
I disagree with what he just said. You wouldn't get funds from anybody. You get funds from citizens, people who believe in you. I think there definitely should be restrictions on board members getting funding to campaigns, because they do it to influence you. So absolutely there should be restrictions.
Okay, Sam Ings.
Well, I would just say this, that as the mayor sit on these particular boards, yeah, there will be contacts. There will be individuals that would reach out to want to support that mayor in their campaign effort. And as a commissioner, I sit on some of the boards, the Metro Plan Board. But, you know, I'm not facing any real issues where it's a quid pro quo. And, you know, in order to do business with me, you have to contribute to my campaign. And this is why the citizens elect the mayor, because you trust in him or her. And this is why we as elected officials have to be cognizant of who we are and what we do to make sure that our integrity is not blemished in any way.
Okay. I wanted to ask all of you, to be a little different for the mayor, but for all of you, if you're elected mayor, what would you think would be your legacy? What would you like to leave behind? Rita Simons, I think we're starting with you.
For me, that I help build people up, because that's what I've been doing for the past 20 years by helping people start their business. And when they start their business, they solve problems and they save lives. So that's what I want to be remembered for.
Okay, Sam Ings.
Yeah, as for me, it's crime prevention and economic development. It's about affordable housing. It's about roads and infrastructure. It's about an inclusive Orlando. So all of those things are important to me as mayor because I'm reaching out to the citizens and visitors that come through Orlando, and we have to make sure that they are given the best quality service that the city has to offer. And I'm speaking of every aspect of the city, not just a certain group of people, but all aspects of the city. You know, when I look in Holden Heights, for instance, I see a city dumpsters, and it's been there for over 16 years. And I see no development, no growth in that particular area. So I would bring an inclusive Orlando for all communities because every community deserves the city.
Okay, and Buddy Dyer.
I think that I led a city that was able to respond in the fashion that it did at Pulse, that we weren't defined by the act of the demented killer, but we were a city that responded with compassion and love and unity, and that all of our people are welcome and we provide opportunity for everyone, regardless of their race, their color, or their sexual orientation.
Okay, I wanted to ask about Sunrail, which is something I'm interested in. I ride it. The city is looking at some pretty significant costs to keep it running in a couple of years. I was wondering if you could talk about where that subsidy is going to come from, and how do you see Sunrail's future in this region? Sam Ings, I think we're starting with you.
Yeah, you know, and that's a very good question, and we still don't have the answer yet. And it's not just the city of Orlando in this case, it's a regional issue as we deal with Sunrail. And what's important is that we know that the Florida Department of Transportation is right now running Sunrail, and they're ready to turn it over into the hands of the city as well as the region. And we have to come up with this particular plan. So, and I know that everybody is willing to sit down and talk, because we've got to definitely do that. Some talks are already going on, you know, because the mayor is more involved in things like that from that perspective. But what I do know is Sunrail is good for our region, is good for the city. I love using Sunrail for those that are in the northern part of the region as well as the southern part of the region, because especially when you have your games at the Magic Amway Center, that they have an opportunity to utilize that as transportation to get there. Okay.
Buddy Dyer.
So I feel like I've been working on Sunrail my entire life. It's been at least since I've been mayor. Going to the legislature took 3 times to get it passed, but it's critically important if we're going to move from a car-based economy to more multimodal, that Sunrail be successful. And with the opening of the south phase that went down to Kissimmee and Poinciana, we've almost doubled the ridership on a daily basis. But the important next step, well, there's 2. There's one, the locals are going to take it over in about 18 months, and we're going to need to figure out how we're going to pay for that, because it costs a little bit more than we anticipated. But we've kind of made a plan for it in our budget, and I hope that the other counties have as well. But secondly, it's getting it to the airport and getting it to 7-day-a-week service and more frequent service. And I'm going to be supporting Mayor Deming's effort in November 2020 for a dedicated funding source. And I think that's going to be important for the future, because the only way we won't be successful is if we fall behind in our transportation infrastructure.
Okay, Aretha Simons.
Well, you said you ride it.
I do.
I know that a lot of people do. I met a gentleman that rides it from Kissimmee to downtown every day. But I think it's important that we do focus on funding. And my thing is that we knew that we were going to be running out of federal funding years ago. We knew when the timeline was going to be. So 18 months, we have to come up with millions of dollars. And yes, there is a proposal to raise a half-cent tax here in Florida, or excuse me, Orange County. I think that we are a tourist city. So why not raise the tourist tax? I know that the tourist tax is usually used for the convention center and the sports arena, but why not raise the tax? You got 75 million people coming here. Why not charge them the half-cent tax instead of the 2 million people that live here? It makes more sense to do it that way. Otherwise, we will be fighting for funding year after year after year if we don't raise the taxes. And if we do raise a tax, I want to make sure in writing that we use all the funds for transportation, because a lot of times we'll raise a half-cent tax and then money will be moved from here to there and not used for transportation, and years later we have another transportation deficit.
Okay. I lost track but you already answered the question, right? Sammings?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I was distracted.
If you want me to
well,
go.
since the mayor brought it up, I would like to ask about the tax, which I guess is still being discussed about what it's going to do and how it would be spent. And I believe it's 1 cent, or yeah, it's 1 full cent. Yeah. So I would like each of you to talk about that a little bit. Mayor, you said that you
Yep.
support it.
I'll be
can you
supporting
talk more
it,
about
and
why?
what's important to know is that more than 50% of the sales tax in Orange County is paid by tourists, paid by visitors, and 1 cent of sales tax will generate about $640 million a year. 1 cent of tourist development tax generates about $40 million a year. So there's a significant difference in the penny that you could get from tourist development tax. I think it's critical that we have, and I'm going to follow Mayor Deming's leadership, but that we have a definite plan that lays out exactly how the money will be spent and what it will be spent on. The particular penny that they're looking at can be used for both capital and for operational funds. So we can build in some operational things, but I think it would be extremely helpful on the capital side for us to fund the Sunrail piece and the Links piece.
Okay, Rita Simons, you mentioned the tax, and doesn't sound like you're crazy about it. But what about using the amount of money that tourist tax would generate would be less? How do you compensate for that?
I still think we should move that tax to the tourism industry. And he mentioned that I didn't know it went up to a penny. First, I thought it was just half a cent. So now it's a full penny. Everybody will have to pay that tax, whether you're poor, whether you're rich. So everybody will pay the same tax. We already have low wages. We're the lowest wages, so you're taxing people who already have a low wage. So I think it's important that we reconsider that. But the beautiful thing about it is the voters get to decide on it. They would be voting on whether we raise the tax or not.
Okay. Sam Ings, how are you feeling about a sales tax?
Well, I'm not feeling it right now, and specifically because it's another tax. It's another tax on the people. We've got an affordable housing crisis here in Orlando, and we need to deal with that. But at the same time, when you talk about putting more burdens on the citizens, we need to make sure that the citizens understand what is happening with this funding and where it's actually going. And I do know that the Mayor Demings is going around throughout the county having community meetings and talking with the public and that sort. And I haven't been to any one of those, but I do feel a sense of an additional tax is a little bit too much. We need to really find ways. We've been trying to find ways for bringing in some transportation needs. We've thought about $2 on the rental car surcharges. And then so that kind of died and went away. But sometimes we could bring it back again, too. We need to look at all areas.
Okay. I have fistfuls of questions from the audience, so we're going to get to a couple of those. Aretha Simons, why don't we start with this since you're a veteran?
Okay.
This question asks, in our city we have a lot of homeless veterans who need medical treatment, but the Veterans Hospital is in Lake Nona. As mayor, how would you plan to get transportation for them to get treatment or create a facility for them to go to that is closer to downtown?
I worked at the VA hospital in a dental clinic, and the dental clinic is one that is very critical because a lot of veterans will have their appointments at 4 o'clock. When you have an appointment at the VA, sometimes you wait months. So if you have a 4 o'clock appointment and you have to ride the bus from the west side, it's hard for them to get back home because the bus is stopped during certain times. So my plan to make sure that the veterans have their transportation is, first of all, have a rideshare program. We need to create rideshare programs. So the VA has a rideshare program for the employees, but we need to create more for the veterans. Also, the Lake Nona, the Lake Baldwin location, they closed down certain parts. I would ask them to open up more places, centers or places where the veterans could be seen back up instead of moving them all to Lake Nona, because they moved most of them to Lake Nona, but they need to bring some back so that the people who live on the west side and downtown can get to Lake Baldwin to see the VA doctors.
Okay, Sam Ings.
Yeah, it is about transportation and being able to get the veterans to Lake Nona at the VA center so that they can be seen by the doctors and also the nurses there. And not only that, but you have opportunities for community events that do go on at the Veterans Center as well. And so right now there is a program by Lynx, I believe it is, that provide transportation for these veterans out there to these facilities. And I believe Seniors First is also involved in the transportation too. So both of those entities need funding to be able to help do even more. And so that's where we have to really look and see where can we help in so many ways. As that mayor of Orlando, I would definitely be an advocate in speaking with the federal government and the state government and making sure that we do have adequate transportations for veterans to get health care.
Okay, Buddy Dyer.
Okay, so note that there is agreement between Commissioner Ings and I on one of the questions, and it's this one. You know, we're very fortunate in our community that we worked really hard to bring that VA hospital here. I know Senator Nelson, Representative McCullum worked for years to get that here to Orlando, and it is a state-of-the-art facility. Focuses also on health care for women, recognizing the number of women that serve in the military now. And Commissioner Ings is right about the two forms of transportation. If we need more, then we need to work directly with the VA to figure out when and how and where the veterans are coming from and see what we can do to support them.
Okay, this is an interesting question. It says, the mayor's salary exceeds that of the Florida governor and Florida U.S. senators. I can't vouch for that, but maybe someone will tell me if that's correct. But the question is, how do you plan to address that compared to $15 an hour rate for staff? I think the question is trying to address inequity. Who do I start with? Sam Ings, I think it's your turn.
Hey, I'm not making the money yet. And let me get in there first, and then I can start off with answering this question. But I would say this, that being the chief executive officer of the city of Orlando, you have a lot on your plate. And it's not just an 8 to 5 job, wherein you can clock in at 8 and go home at 5 p.m. Being in this job as mayor of the city of Orlando, it's so time consuming that sometimes you wonder, where do you get the strength and the energy to be able to do that? So trying to compare the two, I think, is not fair in so many ways. But I think what's really important is trying to make sure that that minimum wage goes up to $15 an hour, and that we have a living wage that's probably $2 or $3 an hour more, And then obviously as they go through the ranks and they are promoted to different positions, that their salaries are also increasing.
Okay, Buddy Dyer.
Okay, we agree on 2 questions in a row. How about that? I think the governor's underpaid. The salary that they make, and I don't know what it is, but most of the top officials in state government make way below a market salary. The secretaries of the environment and judges are all underpaid in terms of the jobs that they do. And I put in quite a few hours as mayor, but I love it. And I'm not going to suggest that I would work for free, but I would almost work for free.
Okay. Rita Simons.
So the question is, how do you compare the mayor's salary to people who are making $15 an hour, correct?
Well, yeah, I think the writer of this question is probably just interested in sort of the basic inequity between people at the top and people at the bottom.
Well, it is unfair, but when you're, have moved to the top chain of command, then you make a higher salary. So there is no comparison, really. There's just no comparison. You can't compare that.
Okay. This question is, and this will go to Buddy Dyer first, when contracts become available, what will you do to help minorities get contracts?
We have WMBE policies that have goals of 18% and 6%, 24% overall in some of the more high-profile things that we've had, like our venues. We've far exceeded those goals. The other thing that we have is our Blueprint program that has helped to employ people that have been homeless, live in Paramore, and there's let's see, homeless, ex-offenders. So we're working on it at both ends, both the minority businesses, and we have made it easier to qualify as minority business.
Okay, Aretha Simons.
I think the minority business owners, I think they need to understand the application process, because I used to sit on that review board and a lot of people just didn't know how to fill out the application. So maybe once a month have training so that they can come in and see how the application is done, what needs to go in the application, because a lot of times when they come in with incomplete applications, or they're just not ready. So I think we make sure that they are ready when they come to apply for the funding, but making sure training is available, that's important.
Okay, Sam Ings.
Thank you. And what's important too about the MWBE program is making sure that department heads that are putting together the contracts to go out for bid, that the contractors that are applying for these contracts with the City of Orlando, that we do due diligence with them to make sure that they understand the city's policy concerning minority and women-owned business policies. Because a lot of companies that are involved in the city's procurement process, they could care less. And so we do have to ask the questions, what have we done really to find out whether or not there is minority participation in this particular project. And so that's been always critical with me from that perspective, and I will continue to do that. And I think our department heads get the message, and they do try hard to make sure that they can get that.
Okay. I think this question came up because of a bill that recently has been filed by a local state legislator. What is your opinion about rent control or other rent stabilization in Orlando? Aretha Simons, I believe it's your turn to go first.
Well, rent control is important. I think that when new development is built, it depends on where it is, because you're not going to control rent downtown, but it depends on which part of town it is. And when we do offer rent control, make sure that something is in writing that is set at that same rent for 30 years instead of 5 years. Because City Village, when it was built, the rent went up within 5 years, and then people, like my cousins couldn't afford to move there, who wanted to move there. So I think when it comes to rent control, we have to make sure that when they're building, if they're having certain apartments at a lower rate, that we keep that in place for a longer term.
I think this is referring to the state right now prohibits local governments from setting rent controls so that you can only increase rents by a certain amount. And this bill would allow, would reverse that and allow local governments to impose rent control so that you would tell landlords, you know, that they could only increase rent by a certain amount. So I think that's what they're referring to. So I just wondered if you have an opinion on whether local governments should be empowered to have policies that control rents.
I do. I think local government should control local government, so absolutely.
Okay. Sam Ings?
Well, I would say this, that for local government to control rents, it's a very interesting situation, and it really is, because now we begin to mandate to the private industry that here is what you can charge somebody to live in your property. And I think what we really need to do is provide incentives for the property owners so that they are able to afford to be able to give reasonable rents for affordable housing needs and that sort of thing within the city. Was that a stop or was that 30 seconds? Okay.
You have more time.
So with that, for us to strategically look at making certain that our business community and the city of Orlando agree on these type issues, that we are here for the people, and we want to assist the people to be able to live, work, and play in the city of Orlando and be productive citizens.
Okay. Buddy Dyer?
So living in the realm of reality, I can't remember the last time the Florida legislature empowered local governments to do anything. They've gone exactly the opposite direction. We fight every single year trying to maintain local control, but they're mandating everything from plastic bags to straws to who can cut their grass at what time. So I don't see any realistic movement on that. And I would like to go back and clarify the housing trust that is in Paramore that has 82 homes in it. It is limited in the amount of rent that can go up, and it's capped at 2% a year. So we're going to be able to keep people in those homes with the rent not increasing enough that it's going to impact them and make them leave.
Okay. This is a climate change question. At this point, science agrees Earth is warming because of human beings. The reason is greenhouse gases. Will you, if elected, stop urban sprawl and start increasing density on existing urban lands? And the writer uses Lake Nona and Deseret as examples of sprawl that are exacerbating the problem. So I think, Sam Ings, it's your turn to go
you know,
first.
because I'm looking at you and thinking of sprawl in Lake Nona, because in that area, it's a planned development. It's being controlled out there. But when we talk about climate change, I think it's important that we realize that solar power is something that we need more of for our homes, our apartment units. We do need to go green more within our communities. And I think working with Orlando Utilities and even the state of Florida to help us get there, because it's important that homes are equipped so that they are saving energy and not using more energy. And that's important to me.
Okay. Buddy Dyer?
So we're on the forefront of climate change activity. Our federal government pulled out of the Paris Accord, and we have adopted all of those goals. We've adopted goals to have the city running on green energy by 2030 and the entire community by 2050. So that involves retiring the coal Stanton 1 and Stanton 2. If you look at every objective measure, Orlando always is #1 in the Southeast United States in terms of sustainable cities, and that was a thoughtful goal that we are pursuing, and we know it's good not just for the climate and for our future resources, but in most cases, it's a good economic decision. When we did energy audits of all of the city buildings and did energy retrofits with what we call a green bond, and we were able to pay for all of the upgrades through $2 or $3 million worth of energy savings and pay for half of the new police headquarters.
Okay. Aretha Simons, climate
For
change
Orlando.
and sprawl.
Climate change is for Orlando to be a green city. We have definitely tore down a lot of forests, and then we give away trees. I just ordered 2 trees. That's going to take a long time to grow. I think, and Lake Nona, he mentioned Lake Nona, that's the next area where they're going to be tearing down a lot more trees. So climate change is very important, and I definitely want to sit with the environmentals and talk about what they see that we need to focus on, because we're building highways and bridges. We're getting ready to tear down areas in Lake Nona to build more bridges. Definitely we'll focus on climate change here in Orlando and make sure that we're not tearing down any more protected forests like we've been doing in the past.
Okay, we'll start with Buddy Dyer for this question. What's your vision for better connecting Orlando to other Florida cities like Tampa and Miami?
Well, I had the vision that we would have a high-speed rail connection between Tampa and Orlando, but Governor Scott gave the federal $2.4 billion back, so we don't have that connection. We will in 2 years, a little over 2 years from now, have the Virgin Trains connection from Miami to Fort Lauderdale to West Palm to Orlando International Airport. There's also discussion with Virgin about going on from our airport to downtown Tampa. There's nothing in concrete related to that yet, but that's something that I think we need to continue to pursue. And then I said before, we need to get Sunrail to the airport. That changes the equation for a lot of people. Think about being able to get on right here at Florida Hospital, take it to the airport, transfer over to the Virgin train, and be in Miami basically in about 3.5 hours. So that's huge.
Okay. Aretha Simons, Orlando connecting to Tampa and Miami.
The
How
only
would you
way
do it?
the only way we'll be able to do that is continue to lobby for funding for that. I know it was canceled a couple years ago, but we have to continue to lobby for funding for that. That's the only way that's going to happen, if we get that federal funding to make it happen.
Okay. Sam Ings.
Thank you. You know, the voters really have to take charge here. And I think that's real important, you know, because when President Barack Obama allocated funding to be able to come to the city of Orlando and the Orlando region for the high-speed rail from Orlando to Tampa, we knew we had it made. But the governor decided that he would withhold and not even accept those particular funds. And that's where we lost out. And now we do have a private company that's coming in to provide high-speed rail from Miami to Orlando, and it also wants to connect in Tampa as well from Orlando. But what I know that's important is that somehow or another we do have to get this done, because not only for Tampa, but also St. Petersburg and Sarasota counties over there, and all of that's important to connect the state. The state needs to be connected with high-speed rail.
Okay, I'm going to paraphrase this question. I think what the writer would like to know is what you're going to do, what you have done, or want to do about the homeless situation and the people on Paramore area, in the Paramore area, but I'll add also the downtown area. Aretha Simons, I think it's your turn to start.
Well, we have to work with the nonprofits who have the capacity to help the homeless, whether it's through transition housing or whether it's through putting them with other agencies. Those are the ones who can do the work. The city, the government can help them with the funding. They can't solve all the problems. We have to work with nonprofits, private and public entities who can do this for us and work with us while we're making a difference in our community.
Okay, Sam Ings.
First of all, I would start by creating the Mayor Samuel B. Ings Council on Homelessness. And I think that's important because it is a top priority of mine. And I think what's also important about this is that we need to touch every homeless person that's in the city of Orlando, and specifically in our downtown area. They're on the street corners. It's dangerous. They're in the businesses, and it's uncomfortable for business people. But what we have to do is really get into mental health for those individuals, to recreate who they are so that we can turn them now back into productive citizens of society. So I would create that council on homelessness right there in the city of Orlando.
Okay, Buddy Dyer.
So when I ran in 2003, I was asked what's the most difficult challenge you'll have, and it was dealing with the issue of homelessness. And I would say, what's the most difficult challenge we have now? It's dealing with the issue of homelessness. And there's no easy answer, but we've made a lot of headway. We created a Central Florida commission that has the same type of players that were behind the venues and Medical City to work together on the issue. We've made it a regional issue. We've switched our methodology to housing first, which means instead of making homeless individuals jump through a variety of hoops before they can get into housing, we put them in permanent supportive housing, which is right into a house or an apartment, and then surround them with supportive services. And we have been 95% successful housing people that way, and we've housed close to 400 now through using that program. But there are many more that need help, and the chronically homeless are either usually have a mental or physical disability that doesn't allow them to mainstream.
Okay, we're going to do 2 more questions, and then we're going to have closings. Sam Ings, this question will start with you. What will you do about police brutality since the mayor appoints the police chief?
Well, that's a very good question, especially being a retired police commander with the City of Orlando Police Department. And we know that internal affairs is that investigative agency within the organization. But as the mayor of Orlando, my message to the chief of police is to make certain that every police officer is trained and also held accountable when it comes to police brutality. There should be none on the Orlando Police Department. It's about training. It's about relationships. And that's why I talk about crime prevention and public safety, because when you're building positive relationships between the police and the community, it's more of community-oriented policing than it is a Gestapo, because we don't want that type of service provided to the citizens of the City of Orlando. But we do want the police to be able to do their jobs effectively, and do their jobs to make sure that our public is safe.
Okay, Buddy Dyer.
So we don't want to condone that in any form. We want to be 100% supportive of our public safety officials, both fire and police, but we want them to act professionally. They need to be well trained. They need to know how to conduct themselves with people of different races, of different ethnicities, of different sexual orientations. Our current chief knows that very well. Occasionally, when they issue discipline, it's overturned through the arbitration process. We've seen that both with fire and police, but we have certainly upped the standard of discipline.
Okay, Aretha Simons.
I definitely think that we have to make sure that we don't create a culture where we let police get away with using excessive force. As former military police is important to me, and police have a place in my heart. I understand what they go through. I understand they have to worry about getting home safely. But when it comes to police brutality, there's always one bad police that will make all the police department look bad. And I think we need to hold them accountable immediately. Don't wait. Don't say we're going to do more training. They get training in the police academy, so they should know better. So if they do something that is against policy or they use excessive force, I think they need to be dealt with immediately.
Okay, this last audience question is kind of broad, but maybe an important one. You might have already spoken to it, Buddy Dyer, but you'll start. What is your #1 priority and why?
As a city government, your #1 priority always has to be the safety of your citizens. If your citizens aren't safe, they can't be productive. They can't look for educational opportunity. The tourists will stop coming. So continuing to invest in public safety would be my #1 priority. And right now we have more police officers and firefighters per 1,000 residents than any major city in the state of Florida. And we've increased funding out of our general fund for public safety by about 10% while I've been mayor. 10% as a, like 55% versus 45% of the general fund.
Okay, Aretha Simons.
My number one priority is making sure we get the funding that we need. We need funding for so many areas in our community, and that's why I want to create a grant management team to make sure that we are applying for the funding that's dedicated to our city. A lot of times the city doesn't apply for the funding. I've seen $400 million worth of funding for transportation that we did not apply for, and one of the first things I'm going to do is make sure I get an audited budget, an audit of the budget to make sure that when we got funding that it went to where it said it was supposed to go, and then if it didn't go that way, to make sure that we now move it to where we need to go so we can help our community be healthy financially.
Okay, Sam Ings.
Well, my number one priority is really making sure that there is a great connection between our police and our fire and our community. And what's important about that is those police officers, those firefighters, they are the frontline ambassadors of the city of Orlando. They meet the public out there every day. And it's important that we make sure that police and fire are held to a standard that is comparable to any other standard of a professional police officer or a professional firefighter. The public needs to have confidence in its city. It needs to have confidence in the very people that are out there to protect and serve them. So that front line is important. And then we can't even forget about our permitting department, because that's so important too, because the businesses need our help. They need to be able to get in quickly and get their permits approved so that they can get their projects started. And I think it's really important that we do everything that we can to help our citizens.
Okay, we have arrived at the closing statements. You have 2 minutes. You don't have to use all of it, but you can use as much of it as you want. We drew the order out of a bag, not a hat. We didn't have a hat. And we'll start with Buddy Dyer.
Thank you, Mike, for moderating, and again, thank the groups that are sponsoring this and the Science Center for opening their doors, and for you all coming out and spending an hour, a little bit more than that, with us this evening. So, you know, our federal government is at a stalemate and broken. Not proud of that every day. Our state government is not far behind that. But I am proud of what we're doing at the local government level. And I'm proud that we have been able to work together to partner and collaborate and work as a region, irrespective of whether you're Republican or Democrat, whether you're in the county or you're in the city or you're an entirely different county, business community, working with the not-for-profit communities, with local governments. We've got a functioning Central Florida. We've got a functioning local government that's, I think, performing at the highest levels. I'm running for re-election. I think most people know what I stand for. I've been very clear about that. Most people know that what I say is what I mean, and if I say it, I'm going to do it. And I get things done. I've got a little bit of capital stored up from being able to get big things done, and sometimes it takes a little while to get them. I'm not afraid to be bold. I'm not afraid to lead from the front rather than join the parade after it's already started. And I can tell you this, I am more excited about running for mayor of Orlando this year than I have been ever. I think we're on a great trajectory, and I want to keep it going. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Sam Ings.
Thank you. And I want to say thank you, too, for being that moderator for us, and the League of Women Voters for all that you're doing for our community, and those others that are supporting us. Scott Maxwell, I know you wanted to be up here to moderate, but that's okay. You have the next time.
He's much better at it than me.
Yeah, you know, but I would say this, that it is so important to me that we have an inclusive Orlando that includes everyone. And I want a better Orlando for everyone. We've talked about all of the good things that we've done for the city of Orlando, Creative Village, et cetera. But there are those pockets that have been left out in the past 16 years. And it's something that we have to really be able to deal with. When we talk about the affordable housing issue and the affordable housing crisis, well, it affects our entire community. And when we talk about having the President of the United States, Donald Trump, President Trump, come to the come to Orlando. He was coming here for his rally. And at that time, I actually sent him a letter. I sent a letter to him and to Secretary Ben Carson saying, look, come down and take a look at 2 areas that are in my district, Lake Man Homes and Murchison Terrace. I'd love for you to come and walk and see what the needs are there, because it is about the people, and it's not about partisan politics now. It's about trying to help a community, and that's what I want to do, is to be able to help a community. I would have loved to have him come in, Air Force One, and be there, and as mayor of Orlando, shake his hand and say, welcome, Mr. President, to Orlando. Now let him go on to his own rally and do his other thing there, but in the meantime, we've got to do some business, and that business is taking care of and providing housing that's affordable for our people.
Thank you. Rita Simons, you get the last word.
Thank you, and I want to say thank you to moderating and the League of Women Voters, and for all of you for being here. Listen, this election is not about anybody up here. It's about the people of Orlando. I filed to run November 2017, and I started knocking on doors. I started early because I knew it was going to be a marathon for me. And I was listening to people and the things that they said that they wanted to see different, and knowing that they wanted to hear from somebody else. They said, we want a new voice. So I said, you know, what things matter to you the most? And yes, people talked about affordable housing, but affordable housing doesn't affect everybody. And people talked about transportation, but I learned so much more from visiting people, going to their door, and some of them invited me into their homes. Orlando is a beautiful place to live. I think that's why we all live here. But I think we can do a lot better. We can do a lot better for our people, with affordable housing. We can do a lot better with transportation. We know what the problems are before they're going to happen. That's why we make plans. That's why we make budgets years in advance. And so I think we need to focus on getting those funding for it, making sure we have grant writing teams who can already be applying for those grants long before, making sure we work with public and private partners, because there's people right here in this city that can write an $8 million check to solve our housing problems for the homeless. But they need somebody who say, you know what, this is what we need to do, and need somebody, a leader who is going to lead that charge and not focus on special interests. When I filed to run for mayor, I was looking at the time. I knew it was going to be a challenge, but I made it here. I'm the first female veteran to qualify, and many years ago, women could not vote. So I'm here to fight for you, just like I fought in 2 wars for our country. I'm here to fight for you, make sure we build up people's lives, and make sure we save lives. And I ask you for your vote on November 5th. Thank you.
Well, candidates, thank you very much. I'll see you all on Thursday. Audience, thank you very much. Your behavior was a lot better than I suspect the audience at the other debate will have later on. And thanks, everybody. One more round of applause for everybody.